Hey there, I'm Mr. Left Turn and welcome to my favorite race shop. So, since I've gotten a little behind on my reviews because of my trip to Baltimore, I've decided to do something a little different. I'm combining Triple Threat and To Change a Changeling into one review video, not only to save time, but because the latter episode is, at least partially, a follow-up to the former. And since a few of my subscribers expressed some concern that I skipped Triple Threat, I figured this would be the best way to get back on track. Anyway, without further ado, let's kick off this video with Triple Threat. Yes, when the synopsis for the latter episodes of Season 7 were leaked earlier this year, this was the one episode that most people were skeptical about, at least from what I saw. And truthfully, so was I. Spike had been on such a tear of phenomenal appearances since the Season 6 premiere, and seeing this stock plot concerning him trying to keep Thorax and Ember away from each other definitely threw up some red flags. But, as per usual, I went into this as open-minded as possible because the show has taken common or seemingly predictable plots before and turned them into great episodes, like with Castle Sweet Castle in Season 5. However, this sadly wasn't the case with Triple Threat. Right from the beginning when Thorax showed up unexpectedly in Ponyville, the conflict of the episode pretty much went how I thought it would go. You can get away with this plot in a shorter show like SpongeBob or a short scene in a movie like Mrs. Doubtfire, but it's hard to pull off in a 22-minute show if there's no real variations to mix things up. Sure, there were a few jokes to pull a comedic edge for the episode, which I'll get to later, but even then, the predictability was still distracting to me. Though to be fair to Spike, Thorax did show up out of the blue unannounced to see him. Pushing that fact aside, however, Spike still could have just collected himself and gotten alone with Thorax out of Ember's sight and told him that now wasn't the best time, or as Fat Man Falling said in his review, he wasn't expecting Thorax to visit him so soon. At least then, that's politely telling someone to leave by hinting that they're totally unprepared for their visit. And even though I can understand Spike's fear of how Ember and Thorax could react to each other, they've been shown to be more reasonable than their dragon and changeling brethren. I'm positive Thorax would have understood that his surprise arrival was a little rude. And who knows, even if Spike had tried to explain his plans with Ember to Thorax, the Changeling and Dragon could have hit it off right away and Ember might have asked Spike to let him stay. And yeah, it might have taken a while for the two to really get to know each other, but with how nice Thorax already is and how eager Ember was to learn about friendship, I don't see a real reason why Spike would automatically assume the worst about friends he gave more of a chance than anyone else when he first met them. But no, we have to have Spike overreact and keep his friends apart, thus reducing the time he's spending with them, causing them to get more and more irritated before they get angry with him and then they discover his ruse with nothing really new thrown at the trope. Speaking of Thorax and Ember calling out Spike for what he did, this was one of my favorite parts of the episode. I loved how they both told off Spike and found one another to vent to, which led to Thorax helping Ember be more patient and understanding with her dragon subjects, while Ember inspired Thorax to be more tough and assertive with his changeling horde, especially the rogue group including his brother that still has yet to willingly share love instead of forcefully taking it. They got to break the ice by having their anger with Spike be something they have in common, only to find out they're both running into problems with their respective subjects. What really makes this even better is how they find friendship in one another, and they use that to go back to Ponyville and let Spike have it yet again. And they don't sugarcoat it. Thorax and Ember drill it into Spike that he made a boneheaded move to keep them apart rather than them instantly forgiving Spike or having Spike find them and bring them back together to explain himself. Plus, he accepted his friend's disappointment and took responsibility without the episode somehow letting him off the hook. This is one thing I can give the episode credit for. At the very least, the resolution was well done compared to the cliché conflict. And you know, I really enjoyed the comedy Triple Threat had to offer. I loved Twilight's giddiness about the map being able to call Spike, Spike cheering that Lyra and Bonbon were arguing, Ember eating the crystal bowl and the pillars in Twilight's throne room before taking Ditsy's muffin away and smashing it onto a wall, and Ember confusing Starlight with Twilight, even though Starlight is pink and Twilight has wings, which Spike could have pointed out. And that's forgivable because Thorax was also adorable when he thought the fire was for him and when he ran up to meet Twilight in the library. So, even though the episode was mostly predictable, I still liked the interactions between Ember and Thorax. How they ended up helping each other, Spike facing the consequences for overreacting and not trusting his friends, the jokes, and the revelation that not all the changelings, including Thorax's brother, had accepted the new way of sharing love. To me, Triple Threat is kind of like Buckball season in this way. Stock plot, but it has good enough jokes and actually does something interesting with its outcome to keep it enjoyable. Although I'm still going with a yellow flag rating, consider it a very high yellow flag and the best out of the yellow flag episodes for the season. And speaking of Thorax's brother, onto To Change a Changeling.
You gonna do superhero landing? Wait for it! Superhero landing! Yeah, that's really hard on your knees.
Now, while the synopsis for Triple Threat had me concerned, the one for it to change a changeling grabbed my attention and interest in a few different ways. I was definitely interested in having Thorax going through a family dilemma, but I was also curious as to how Thorax could have a specific brother since he was hatched alongside hundreds of other changelings. But I wanted to see how that would play out. Yet, it was the foreshadowing from Triple Threat about Pharynx and other renegade changelings that drove home the importance of this episode for the development of the changelings. And boy was it good! It did not take long for Pharynx to become my favorite part of the episode. I loved how snarky and upfront he was with everyone and everything, being too stubborn to accept the new ways that changelings live and share love rather than steal it. It made for quite the conflict with him pitted against the entire hive, even Thorax. His brutal honesty also led to Pharynx becoming a one-line machine gun, shooting off hilarious responses nearly every time he opened his mouth.
What a ridiculous comparison. We are nothing alike. I put you in a bag. I thought it went great. Wow, so you're both losers.
However, I can understand his resistance to how the changelings are now because he had good points. Although Thorax was guiding the changelings under a much gentler hoof than Chrysalis, perhaps it was becoming too gentle. Despite the fact that changelings literally sucked love out of ponies, they were a group no one dared to challenge. Pharynx's complaints mainly came from the fact that his swarm was becoming too soft and cared more about feeling good and happy, completely abandoning their reputation of being fierce warriors, which could lead to other groups easily walking all over them. Of course, his cynical demeanor was sort of a smokescreen to mask the fact that he cared deeply for the hive still, and what he told Thorax when they were young was entirely correct. A tougher skin is one of the most important aspects of defending yourself, and the changelings were gradually losing that. As for Thorax in this episode, his character development starting from Triple Threat was amazing. Even though it was expository, he did use the assertive lessons from Ember to persuade all but Pharynx to accept that their ways are different now, which is good to see. However, I really liked how now he's more comfortable flat out telling Starlight her faults, even telling her she's going with him to find Pharynx whether she likes it or not because of her plan to lead the Malworth to the hive, and how her and Trixie's words were what drove Pharynx out of the hive to begin with. Plus, he also managed to stay strong with his belief in Pharynx, despite the entire hive demanding Pharynx's exile. It may have been minute, but his character development here was well done. And at the mention of development, I have to say that seeing how far Starlight and Trixie's friendship has come was one of the best parts of the episode. Not to mention, it was very satisfying to have a nod to Trixie's spellcasting lessons from All Bottled Up, especially how she hasn't shaken the habit of screaming the spell as she attempts to cast it. Good continuity once again. Yet, their dynamic has come a long way and I couldn't get enough of their attitudes toward each other. Their friendship has quickly become one of my favorites in the show, and I love how you can tell they treasure their friendship, but Starlight still gets annoyed with Trixie trying to cast a spell while they were trapped, or Starlight leaving Trixie in the middle of a sentence to talk to Pharynx, or even Trixie poking fun at how Starlight's mega speech seemingly failed. I know it's possible to have too much of a good thing, but damn it, I want more of their friendship in the show. Other than Pharynx's one-liners, To Change a Changeling had some really good jokes going for it. I loved how Starlight was getting annoyed with Trixie while they were stuck in Pharynx's bag, Starlight drawing inspirations from Independence Day with her Bill Pullman speech, only for none of the changelings to follow them to find Pharynx until the last minute, Pharynx and Thorax tricking the Malworth into hitting itself until it went away, and then the second best changeling of the episode, the Soup Changeling. And I'd be willing to bet he's probably not allowed in this guy's store.
No soup for you!
Okay, I suppose now I should mention Pharynx's transformation, which I honestly have zero issues with. I really like his new form, not just because he's now the best looking changeling, but because of what I see it representing. His new design is unlike any of the other changelings. He's retaining a darker color than the others, yet he also has their new wings and no longer has fangs or holes in his legs, and he has antlers like Thorax, only smaller. To me, this symbolizes a compromise of the old working together with the new. Throughout the episode, Pharynx hated that the swarm was losing touch with its roots of being fierce warriors and fighters, becoming softer and softer under Thorax's rule, which he feared put the hive at risk for attack by literally anyone. So he attempted to bring the old ways back as best he could with dumping pain on changelings and trying to teach the young ones to hiss and growl as one changeling stated. However, because of working together with the Swarm and Thorax to defeat the Malworth, Pharynx accepted that the changelings aren't fierce warriors anymore that steal love selfishly. They're now more free to be independent to themselves rather than being sort of like the Borg from Star Trek, and that sharing love doesn't make him a complete softie. On the other hand, his actions reminded Thorax and the rest of the swarm that there were good things about their past that they can't just abandon, like staying strong enough to defend themselves and the hive, and to have tougher skin, as he told Thorax when they were kids. Each changeling still wants nothing more than to protect their home and themselves, and both sides taught each other a very valuable lesson. There's a balance of changing oneself for the better, but also not letting go of what defines you. It's obvious, the changelings are now a more peaceful group, but they can't just let go of their measures of defending themselves and their hive. And look, I'm not meaning to get too political here, but one of Teddy Roosevelt's most famous quotes really describes the overall lesson of compromise between Pharynx and the changeling swarm. By working together, they learn that speaking softly but carrying a big stick is the best way for them to thrive. Be peaceful to other societies as they have been now, but make sure you can defend yourself if attacked. And in this way, the old ways working side by side with the new ways makes for a better future for all of the changelings. Which is why I have absolutely no problems with his transformation, and I love what I think it symbolizes. So, without a doubt, To Change a Changeling is much better than Triple Threat and is a definite green flag episode. The story is great. The conflict of the new and old ways clashing is really relatable. The character development for Thorax was on point. The jokes were hilarious, and Pharynx's character was just glorious. I want to see him and Discord in the same room together just so they can throw insult after insult toward each other. To Change a Changeling was just all around solid and was an enjoyment to watch. But now, I want to know what you thought of both Triple Threat and To Change a Changeling. Post your thoughts down below and thanks for watching. I'm Mr. Left Turn. I'll see you when I get back from the track.